My name is Gillian. I'm a senior lecturer in psychology at the University of Essex, so I'm here in Colchester. The sun is not out yet, but I have my fingers crossed. But we have lots of spring flowers popping up through the ground, so it's a very cheery time of year, isn't it? And I've been researching talking to strangers for over 10 years now, and I did a little accounting recently, and it turns out that I have induced more than 4,300 conversations. So I guess I make a very big habit of getting people to talk to each other. I also like to say right now, right from the beginning, I am an introvert. And so I think it's really important to say that, because I don't want people to think that this is just something that extroverted people do. And so hopefully I'll convince you of that by the end of this call. So the goals today, I have 3 things that I'm hoping to do with you. First, I'm going to go easy on, because the first thing is just to try to hopefully remind you about how awesome it is to talk to strangers. And I'm assuming that you're already on board and that you've drunk the Kool-Aid, because you're all here today already. So we'll move on quite quickly to the second thing, which is to talk about some of the barriers that might hold you back. And then finally, talk about some skills. We'll do a lot of practicing to help convince you that you already have the skills that you need to do this. So like Laurie said, the goal here is just to sort of help you build your confidence, because I'm convinced that you already know how to do this. So I'm really just a facilitator today. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking. There's a reason this is called a workshop. It's got the word work in it, and you're doing the work. So we're going to have a lot of breakout rooms and discussions. And the whole point, I think one of the things that I've learned from teaching this workshop before, I've never done it online. This is the first time. I'm very excited. But I have run it in person a bunch of times. And one of the things that people really enjoy is just learning that we're all kind of in the same boat, that everybody's a bit nervous. And so I think the most helpful thing is just to talk to each other and see that we're all kind of feeling the same way. And that helps us build our confidence. It's not just us, this is just normal, and we can figure out how to get past our worries and make real connections. So yeah, we're gonna have a bunch of breakout rooms with small group discussions, and then often we'll come back to the big session here and share things. If you don't want to talk in one of the breakout rooms, you can just change your name to an X. And you're welcome to just listen if you feel uncomfortable chipping in or whatever, that's totally fine. We do have quite a few people here today. I'm so delighted. And I'm also, as a university teacher, usually I just see a sea of black squares. So thank you to all of you who've turned your cameras on. It's such a nice change. It's really awkward to teach to my wall. So it's very nice to see all your faces. When we do have group discussions, I will try really hard to sort of monitor if people want to put up their hand, but please, I'm not intentionally ignoring anyone. If you want to just speak up without waiting for someone to call on you, please feel free to do that. I mean, if it turns into chaos and we're all talking at the same time, we'll figure out a plan, but hopefully that won't happen. Please, just speak up. Yeah, so as Laurie said, we're going to use something called Padlet a couple of times. I'll give you some instructions on that as we go on. If you're technologically challenged or just don't want to participate in that part, that's fine. I'll give you an alternative to that. But it's a way for us to share stuff between each other. So hopefully that'll be fun. We have a couple polls, a bunch of breakout rooms, and we're going to start with, have you ever? So what I'd like you to do is use the reaction button, which you'll see at the bottom of Zoom. I'm going to ask you a question, have you ever? So if the answer is yes, maybe put a thumbs up. And if the answer is no, you can use the face that looks surprised, that face. So first question, have you ever felt a bit nervous about the prospect of talking to a stranger? Excellent. So that's exactly what I expected. Oh, we got one. No, excellent. Joe West in Sussex, not nervous at all. Emma Juke, not nervous at all. But most people are saying, yeah, there have been times when I felt a little nervous. And that's why we're here today. Hopefully, you're going to feel a bit more confident by the time we're done. Okay, so we're going to start. We're just going to jump right in. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put you in some breakout rooms for the majority of the session with the same people. And that's just because, it's nice to sort of build up a sense of trust and get to know each other a bit. At the end of the session, we will give you a chance to sort of practice by being in a breakout room within a new group of people. So we're just going to start right now with 5 minutes to just have a chat. No agenda, whatever you like, introduce yourself, just get to know the people in your breakout room. I feel like my job here is sort of twofold. I want to tell you a little bit about research about talking to strangers, but also share some stories because I started doing this research because of personal experience. I told you earlier, I'm an introvert. This is not something I've always done. But when I started doing my master's degree, I did it on a campus in downtown Toronto. And I would walk between the buildings and there was a lady who worked at a hot dog stand. And I sort of accidentally developed this relationship with her. And every time I walked past, I would just smile and wave at her. And I realized after a while that even though I'd never talked to her and I'd never bought a hot dog, I just felt really good knowing that she was there, that I knew her, that she knew me. And that's what really put me on this path to do this research, because I wanted to know, is this just me? Or, I mean, it seems like we have so many opportunities, so many people like that in our lives. Is it a source of happiness that anybody could tap into? And that's what really set me on this path. So well-being, mood and connection are two big benefits to talking to strangers, but there are others as well. So you can make new friends. I mean, if you think about it, everybody that you know started off as a stranger, didn't they? I also think it's a big source of novelty. I'm always learning new things from people that I hadn't met. You sort of know at this point what the people that you're close to, what their opinions are, what kind of things they like. You're not surprised that often, whereas you are surprised by talking to strangers. So it's definitely something that's opened my perspective and taught me lots of new things. I've had people recommend, books or movies or hiking trails. I love walking. So I'm always talking to people when I'm walking. And then finally, I think even strangers can provide advice and emotional support. And so one story I'd like to tell, I'm going to tell part of it now and other parts of it, I think, a little later today. But one of my favorite talking to strangers moments happened on the tube in London. And I was talking to a lady who had literally just found out that she was pregnant. So I was, I think, the third person to know that she was pregnant. She'd just been to the GP. So obviously the GP knew, her partner knew. She was heading back to the office and presumably wasn't going to be able to talk about it with people because we don't do that, do we, for a while. And yet there's this huge thing that just happened to her. And so, she felt safe telling me because I'm a stranger and I'm walking away. So it wasn't, it was something that she felt able to do. And so we even had a hug on the tube in London. So that's one of my favorite talking to strangers experiences. So just to summarize, benefits: mood, making new friends and new contacts, information and novelty, and even emotional support sometimes. So this all sounds awesome, right? Talking to strangers is awesome, but we don't do it that often. And a lot of people are very reluctant to do it. So what we're going to switch to now is trying to figure out why that is and see if we can kind of identify what's holding us back and maybe counteract some of the fears that we have. So we're going to switch to Padlet now. So this is a tool that I wanted to use with you because it'll let you sort of respond anonymously, since it might be a little bit, scary to be admitting your own fears. And you can see each other's answers as well. So you can post to Padlet if you like, or you can like other people's posts. So Lori has put the link into the chat. So if you just click on that, it brings up a screen. If you don't want to participate in this or you have technological difficulties, it's fine. You can just put something in the chat instead and we'll move it over to Padlet. But for those of you who feel okay, bring it up. All you have to do is in the bottom right corner, click on the big plus sign and type and tell me, what is your biggest fear? What holds you back from talking to strangers?
can see a few things coming up already. Gillian, is it useful for you or I to share our screen so that we could?
Yeah, I can do that.
Great. There's a lot of rejection and negativity.
Oops.
As Gillian said, if you can't access both, if you're on a phone or anything like that, feel free to put stuff in the chat as well.
Are you seeing the Padlet screen?
Yes, yeah, can see that. Great.
Good.
The text is quite small, so we might just have to run through a few of them so they're.
Great. So I'm seeing, yeah, rejection, not being understood, too shy to do it, nothing to say, not wanting to say the wrong thing, not wanting to bother the other person, worried about, yeah, so lots of stuff about how the other person's going to judge you. So fear of negative judgment, fear of rejection, social anxiety disorder, embarrassment, racism a lot. Overenthusiasm. That's something that's come up that is not something that I personally related to at the time, and I kept hearing it, that people worried that they might talk too much, that, you know, if they get a little bit nervous, they just sort of talk all the time. Not enough time. How to end the interaction. Oh, we're going to talk about that one. Calling police. Okay, I think I'll stop this share there. I don't know if, Laurie, I don't remember if you mentioned that, but we will export this if anybody wants a copy of it afterwards. I think we're planning to share, so feel free to keep adding. I'm going to stop the screen share. That's great. Thank you, everybody, for being so forthright. Hopefully you see already that people are, there's lots of people who share the same concerns as you do. So thought we'd have we'll have our first poll. So Sean is going to show that to us. Have a little vote on what, just the first question, sorry, the second question's for later. So if you could just vote on what's your biggest fear about talking to strangers.
We're on a few seconds to do that. Thank you again for being, I just put that in the chat, for being so open and sharing the rejections, because that's quite a tricky one, isn't it?
Okay, I'll share the results.
So yeah, so this is interesting. So not a single person said that I don't do it because I know I'm not going to enjoy it. It's really more about they like me or they don't want to talk to me, and what if I don't know what to say. So those are some fears that we're going to talk about in detail in a few minutes. But first, I'm going to first I'm going to give you a chance to go back to your breakout room and have a little chat about it. So you might want to talk about some of the things that popped up on the Padlet, some of the things that you saw that other people were worried about. You might want to talk about the poll, or just anything to do with fears, including, whether any of these fears have actually come true for you. So not a particularly structured chat, just talk about fears related to talking to strangers.
I'll just add, I've changed the settings, so it's going to send everybody automatically into the rooms. But if you don't want to take part, there'll be an option at the bottom of the screen, and you just say leave room, and then that'll bring you back to the main room. So use that if you want to come out of the breakout room. And I'll open them again now.
Pass back to you, Gillian, to carry
on. Right, so other times when we go to breakout rooms, we'll have a little group discussion afterwards, but not this time. But like I said, right at the beginning of the workshop, I think something that I've been told is very helpful is just to know that other people are sharing those same fears as you. So I'm hoping that that's what you're taking away from that little conversation, is that everybody's a little bit nervous, and sometimes, we're even worried about the same things. So I'm going to talk for a couple minutes about some of the particular fears that people have. So first of all, I have had a cat turn up. Here we go. She's going to say hi. let's do a little show of hands. Can we do that with the reaction buttons? So how many people have ever had a truly awful conversation with a stranger where you felt unsafe or insulted or just something really bad? Couple thumbs up. If you haven't, can you, yeah, but thank you. Do the like surprise face. Okay, I'm actually seeing lots of thumbs up, which surprises me. So that makes me a little sad. And I've tried to think about that a lot myself. I don't personally feel like I've ever had an awful conversation. I've had plenty of boring ones. But I don't think having an awful conversation, Kat's just gonna sit there and say hi in the background. I don't think having an awful conversation is at all the norm. How many people have had a pleasant or enjoyable conversation with a stranger? Ah, heart, as well as some thumbs up. Excellent. So almost everybody is saying yes to that. So that's good to hear. So, you know, the research that I've done and other people have done sort of shows over and over again that people do tend to enjoy these conversations. That, of course, doesn't mean that every single conversation with a stranger is going to be fantastic. But on average, most of the time, people are enjoying these conversations and enjoying them more than they expect to, despite all these fears that we have. So even though we might sort of be a little bit nervous about thinking, oh, I'm not sure if I could possibly enjoy this, I think we've all kind of seen that it is possible and hopefully often to have a conversation that is pleasant or enjoyable. So the second fear that I wanted to talk about, first one being maybe I won't enjoy it, is what if the other person doesn't like me? Okay, so this is not, thinking of this as a separate thing from rejection, which we will spend more time on in a minute. But what if the other person just doesn't like me? What if we talk and then they just don't think I'm very interesting? And so I've done some research on this and we found what we call the liking gap. So we've had people talk to strangers and then ask them afterwards, how much did you like the person you just talked to? People say, yeah, I liked my partner, they were nice. And then we say, okay, how much did they like you? And people say, oh no, you know, I'm not that interesting. They couldn't possibly have liked me. And it's just not true. So what I want to point out is that you don't know what's going on in someone else's head. I do because I've asked them. That's my job. And I can assure you that people do like you more than you think. And I think what happens is we have this kind of negative voice in our head and we are hearing things like that voice is telling us, you know, I shouldn't have said that, or why didn't I say that other thing? Or what if they didn't understand me? You know, what if they misinterpreted it? And so we're worried about all these things that this negative voice is telling us. But really, if we could just put all that aside and just, if we could get inside someone else's head, we'd realize that other people like us just fine. And I think, you know, if you stop and think about it, you know, I think we've all kind of admitted that we're not sure what to expect when we think about talking to a stranger. We're a little bit nervous. So they probably are too, right? And so if you do have a pleasant conversation, which is the norm, then they're going to be pleasantly surprised, aren't they? And they're going to like you. So yes, if that is your only takeaway from this whole workshop, please be assured that research suggests that other people do like you more than you think. So let's move on to talking about rejection. That came up a lot in your responses on Padlet. Let's have a little group discussion this time. So we can use the chat or just talk out loud, and let's talk about I prefer if people are willing to talk. It's nicer, just unmute yourself and shout something out. If that makes you really nervous, then just put it in the chat. But what does rejection look like? So what kind of signs do we pick up on that make us think that we're being rejected? So, you know, you might want to picture a particular situation to help you think about that. Maybe a group setting, or, you know, you're at a meeting at the office, or I don't know, you're on the tube talking to strangers, which I do all the time. Lori's going to do the whiteboard for us and share her screen. Yes? So we'll make a little list of the signs. So Lori, I can read out some things from the chat, but anybody who's willing to speak up, just unmute yourself and shout it out or put up your hands. I'll try to monitor for hands being up.
People looking distracted.
People looking distracted. Great. So eye contact, not looking at you.
Also being spoken over sometimes.
Being spoken over, sure.
People backing away.
Sure, yeah, so physical space. Yeah, so I'm just reading some things out from the chat. People who are looking at their watch or looking at their phones.
People look uncomfortable.
Right, so maybe Laura, you could just update that first one. Look uncomfortable. Talking, right, it's people giving a one-word answer, so not engaging with you. So I'm seeing a lot of things.
Telling you that they don't like what you say.
Sorry?
Telling you they don't like what you say.
Okay.
Showing you they don't like what you're saying, not engaging, not answering.
Right.
Telling you you're wrong.
Negative facial expressions.
Facial expressions. So I think at a high level, we've got most of the things from the chat. There's some details, but so a lot of things about eye contact, body language, and just, one-word answers or showing you that people don't like what you're saying. So I thought it would be worth taking a couple minutes to see if we could think of other things that could be driving these behaviors. Okay, so what these signs could mean is they don't want to talk to me and I am not worth being talked to. I think that's where our head goes, right? Like, not just they don't want to talk, but that means I'm not worthy of talking to them. So let's talk about some of these things and think about what else they could mean. Okay, so if someone looks distracted or uncomfortable, what else, how else could we construe that? Why else might they be looking distracted or uncomfortable?
They could have something else on their mind. Maybe they're running late for an appointment.
Great.
Because they're feeling the same way that you are.
Exactly.
Maybe they don't know how to respond. They feel uncomfortable in that situation, that they don't know what to do.
Right, yeah.
But there could be cultural differences.
Mm-hmm. And I think that could manifest in a couple of ways, right? So they might feel that, you're acting in a way that they don't expect because it doesn't match their expectations, or that it could even be, this isn't maybe what you had in mind, but there could also be language issues, right? The person might not, you might not speak the same language, and so it might be hard to know what the other person's intentions are. What about the physical signs? So backing away or leaving physical space. Now that we have COVID, sorry, there's a couple things in the chat that, that there might be barriers, like they can't hear you, especially in a noisy environment. They might be suffering from depression or bereavement or something like that. So physical space, I think I'll just say the obvious one with the current situation. So people backing away, or physical space might be just fear of their safety because of COVID. Yeah, what else? How else could we interpret that?
They might think you're flirting with them.
Yes.
They might be suspicious and think you're going to try and sell them something.
Yes, absolutely. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I feel that, actually, I'll just talk about it now. I always feel when I have a conversation with a stranger that there's sort of this 3-stage process that they're going through. The first thing is, do I know you? You know, they think if you're talking to them, you must know them, right? Because it's not the norm to just talk to random people. So they think, do I know you? And then they think, uh-oh, I don't know you. What do you want? Are you weird? Are you trying to sell me something, or, what's happening? And I think you just have to kind of be a bit patient to get to the third stage, which hopefully most people get to, where they realize you're just trying to be friendly. But I do think we have to be aware that, people are going to go through these stages, because it isn't, unfortunately, is not the norm. So yes, someone said this in the chat, feel like you're after something. Feel like you're trying to sell them something.
They might be trying to steal from you,
right?
As well, maybe.
Yeah.
And especially in the underground, maybe.
Yeah. So I think a lot of, they don't know what your intentions are. They can't read your mind. And even though you're just trying to be friendly, you have to realize that they don't know that. And so it might take them a bit to sort of get there. Let's move on to the next one. So look, if someone is looking at their watch or their phone, what else could that mean?
They're not interested in you.
Right. Well, that's rejection. So we're trying to see what else could it mean? It might mean that, but what else could it mean?
They could just be late, running late.
Yeah, great. That's in the chat as well. So they're in a hurry. They might have, someone said there might be expecting an important call.
They've got something else on their mind.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they feel, if they feel anxious when they're in groups of people, that might be a place where they take some comfort, just tucking away in the technology.
Yeah, that's their coping strategy, is looking at their phone. My dad said that the other day, that he finds especially young people, as soon as he gets anywhere close to them, because he is the king of talking to strangers, he likes to talk to everyone, but he says he finds especially younger people, as soon as he gets anywhere near them, he's out comes the phone. And so that's what he figures, is that, for some people, it's just this sort of coping mechanism.
Maybe as a tool.
I was going to say, you don't know whether they're actually answering something urgent on their phone, or whether they don't want to speak to you, or whether they're just shy. So it's difficult to read if people are just looking down all the time.
Exactly.
Maybe to help them communicate, because they can get an app where if they're hard of hearing, then the phone helps them it lists what the people are saying.
Right. So the point of this whole discussion is just to highlight, I think we've had a few sort of moments of realization in the chat. First, that we're a very suspicious bunch. And I think that's normal. Like, I think, unfortunately, our norm is that people don't just walk around being friendly and talking to each other. And so I think it's important to be aware that other people have these suspicions, and surely we do too. And that's fine. It's good to be aware of them. And, as someone pointed out, what did they say exactly? Someone said, Tor said, we never know what's happening in someone else's life. And I think that's the main thing here, is that, we just don't know what other people are thinking. And so it's easy to feel like other people are rejecting us, but that's not necessarily what's happening. And so you can you can remind yourself that actually it could be all sorts of things. It's not necessarily about you.
I think it depends what part of the country you're in as well, particularly in the UK, because down here in the south, it's not really the done thing to walk up to strangers to chat to them. But places in the Midlands and the North, it's the other way around. If you don't go and talk to someone, they think you're being standoffish. It's just local customs.
Norms.
Local norms.
Yeah. And where I'm from a small island, and I know everybody there. I moved to England 11 years ago, and literally everyone that comes here, I literally know them or a relative. So it's normal for me to speak to strangers, but they don't take to it very nicely. So I'm aware like who not to do stuff with. And then other times when I'm totally not self-aware, I will chat to anybody about anything. I'm friendly with babies, kids, animals, anything. It's like normal for me. And then they look at me and they make me sure that they know, they're like, is she crazy? But it's just my culture. So sometimes I'm a bit standoffish because I'm aware that it's frightening people. But it's just who I am, and that's how we talk to anybody, anything, because we're a tourist community as well. So I'm from Bermuda, where we sell and thrive on making friends with people.
That's lovely.
Yeah, it can help if there's a prop as well. Like if someone's got a dog, because I like dogs. So you can go and make a fuss with the dog, and that helps you start a conversation with the person, or maybe with a child, or something they've got with them. That's what gives you a lead in then.
We're going to talk about how to start a conversation shortly, but yes, I absolutely think what both of you are saying is that there are different norms, and I find it fascinating because even within a place like London, where I think we all know that maybe the norm is not to talk, there are still certain situations where people do it, right? Like people talk to the taxi driver, but probably not the bus driver, not on the tube, right? It's okay to talk at the park to someone walking the dog, but it's not okay to talk to someone in the coffee shop who's sitting at the next table. Like why do we construct all these rules, and do they really make any sense? So I find the whole thing fascinating. But my point with this whole discussion is just to remind you that we're all probably extra sensitive to rejection. Nobody likes being rejected. It's easy to read signs of rejection, but maybe you can choose to interpret those signs in a different way. Remember that we don't know what's going on, and just try to create a little bit of extra space to give a conversation the potential to get past that awkward moment that often happens at the start, and get through to the, okay, we're just two fellow humans trying to connect, have one of those beautiful moments. So just to share a little bit, I told you earlier about the pregnant lady on the tube. That conversation almost didn't happen. I thought it was going to be a rejection. So I was on the tube that day, and I turned to her and I, said, how are you doing? How's your day going so far? And she kind of said, fine, whatever. And I thought the conversation might be over. And then she responded back and she said, well, how's your day? And I had quite an exciting day. So I told her, this kind of, thing had happened to me today. And after I disclosed that to her, that's when she disclosed to me that she had just found out that she was pregnant. So it could have very easily been one of those conversations that didn't really go anywhere. And there's plenty of those. But I'm very delighted that it did turn into one of my most memorable talking to strangers moments. But just to share some numbers with you, I did a study recently where it's a scavenger hunt study. So I asked people to talk to a stranger every day for a week, because what I've been finding is that having a single conversation, people always, in all of my studies, report that the conversation goes better than they think, and all the things they worried about didn't really happen. But I think it's easy to think, well, what about the next conversation? That's a totally different person. I don't know what's going to happen there. And so it's hard to learn that there's actually a pattern that most of these conversations are going to be pleasant. And so I thought, okay, I have to sort of force people to have lots of conversations so that hopefully they'll see that pattern and begin to learn that they don't need to be so worried about rejection, et cetera. And so everybody had conversations every day for a week. And so in total, we had participants in my study had over 1,300 conversations. And the rate of rejection, so these were mostly university students on campus, so young people who I think are actually especially fearful. It seems, preliminary data, but it seems that people feel a little bit more confident as they get older. But young people were going up on campus where there's all these, extra social systems going on that make people really worried. And they were rejected less than 10% of the time. So it is really uncommon. In another study that was someone mentioned, Alan mentioned earlier, there's a researcher in Chicago who asked people to talk to fellow commuters on the train. He's since redone the study in London and found the exact same results. So similar to the stuff, what I found, just that people enjoy having that chat more than they think that they do. And he found in his study that nobody reported being rejected by someone on the train. So I'm not sure I believe the 0%, but I think, what my research shows me is that it is very uncommon. So we worry about it a lot, but it doesn't happen that often. Okay, so we are behind on my schedule, but that's fine. So let's move on. So we've talked about a few different fears that people have. Worrying about not enjoying it. That's not a huge fear, but people do underestimate how much they will enjoy it. We talked about being worried that other people won't like us. And I told you about the research on the liking gap. And we've now just talked about rejection. So the next thing that I want to talk about is kind of a package deal, which is the fear that we just don't know what to say, right? So we're going to have a little chat about how to start a conversation, how to keep one going, although I might skip that part because of time. And then the part that I find the hardest, which is how to end a conversation. So let's start by talking about how you start a conversation. And there are, we call it social skills for a reason. Skill, it's something we develop, right? And I think I told you at the beginning, I haven't always been a person that talked to strangers. This is something that I started kind of in my 30s, and I feel like it's something that I've gotten better at as I've practiced more and more. And I practice more than I probably would otherwise choose to, because I do this research and I feel like I have to walk the walk. So I force myself to do it even when I don't feel like it, even though I know that I'm going to enjoy these conversations. But as far as talking about how to start conversations, you already know how to do this. I guarantee it. I've run this workshop before. People can come up with loads of ways to start a conversation. So I'm going to put you back in your breakout rooms just to shake things up a little bit. Talk, I think we'll just do a very short one, like 3-minute breakout room. And just have a quick brainstorm about how to start a conversation with a stranger. Right, so everybody's warmed up now. So now I'm a little bit nervous that everyone will talk at once, but let's see how this goes. Lori's gonna take notes for us, but how do we start a conversation with a stranger? Shout it out.
I think we decided that there were two different things, a meaningful conversation and just a passing conversation. So if you're on the bus, then you can just talk about anything because you know they're going to get off the bus at any point.
Okay.
So with our group, we were talking, like in the UK, you'd normally talk like with the weather. It's like the weather or something.
Classic.
Or something you like about the person, because someone brought up my glasses, the shape
like
of my
compliment.
Glasses. And then I talked about someone's color of their eyes, how unusual they were, So it's making someone feel that you don't want something for them, but you started off with giving them a compliment. So it kind of makes them feel like, okay, this person doesn't want something from me. They just like something about me.
Although they could think you want a date.
With those eyes, honey.
It's showing an interest though, isn't it, in another person? I think everyone, they usually respond well to that.
Showing an interest, yeah, or curiosity.
That idea of curiosity came up in our group as well. I often like to ask questions about, and maybe this is related to compliments, but questions about something they might be wearing, or questions about something that's going on in our surroundings is one way that we got into chat, and happens a lot.
I think there's a couple of things there. So questions, I think, goes with curiosity, and you're right. It's a fine line between that and a compliment, isn't it? It's just a slight difference. Yeah. And I think you said talking about something that you have in common, which I think also kind of goes with talking about the weather, because the weather is like the ultimate thing that we have in common.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that, but it could be things like, you're waiting for a bus and the bus is late, or a train or something like that, or something happens in front of you in a supermarket, somebody drops something or whatever.
Yes, perfect.
Quite often you ask them about their dog, you say that's a beautiful looking dog, or what sort of dog is that, and then you get chatting.
Yes, perfect. That actually is, the compliment. You're complimenting their dog, or you're showing an interest, asking a question about their dog, right? So that's a specific application of those things we've already noted, I think. Other ideas? Anything in the chat?
Yeah. Sometimes flirting. I think the flirting is one that can be fun.
Sure.
And safe.
Sorry?
Yeah, that's it, flirting.
Flirting.
You can
With
also
just everybody being happy and like making people feel good, like just giving positive vibes, literally.
Right, so just being friendly.
Yeah, like going above and beyond.
and perhaps this is related to being friendly, but also just being helpful. I've gotten into a conversation by just holding a door, or if I noticed in a restaurant or a cafe that the jacket fell on the floor and I would offer to pick it up. That's often led to conversations for me as well.
I used to have conversations at UBC, University of British Columbia, where I did my PhD. People would get off the bus, and there's a famous anthropology museum on campus, and it is nowhere near the bus stop. So I'd always see people looking at the map, and I got into a habit of saying, let me show you. And that gave me like a 5-minute chat with them, as I could sort of walk part way with them, and then I'd point them and I'd go my own way. But I had so many conversations with people that I started because I said, can I help you? Can I give you directions?
If you joined a queue, like you're queuing for theatre tickets and you know you're going to be there for some while, I normally say, have you come far? And then, you're still talking to them an hour later.
Yes, absolutely. I've had that many times. And I think that's a particularly easy situation to start a conversation because you're already in a queue for the same thing, right? So you know that you have a shared interest in that show or the, concert or whatever it is that you're queuing for.
So I think when I worked in a shop that was obviously very public facing, when the days when I was moody, I had not many conversations, and the days when I was just like really in a good mood, you feel like people would actually speak to you a bit more. So you're like, the vibes you're giving off, people either want to be involved in them or they just don't because you're a moody person. So it can be like surprising where you're not necessarily looking for a conversation because you're a bit upbeat, that comes your way anyway, I found.
Perfect. I think that goes with said about just being extra friendly and having those positive vibes. So yeah, I get asked, as someone who researches talking to strangers, I get asked a lot for tips. What do we do? How do we start a conversation? And I'm always reluctant to give them because I really do think that people already know what to say. But if I'm forced, I will talk about being brave. So that's the tip that seems to resonate the most with people. When I've given people a choice of which tip to use, that's the one that they like the most. And that just goes back to that research I was telling you about with the liking. So just trying to be conscious that, probably, the other person's gonna have all these concerns and stuff, and you're gonna have concerns about, but if you can just ignore them for a second and just try to be brave and not listen to that negative voice in your head. That's something that helps people able to get started. So it's not the same as starting a conversation, but that's what you maybe need to do to allow yourself to start a conversation.
I think somebody described it earlier on as kind of a skill. And it's something that as you do it more, and I was put in a situation with a job where I just had to phone up a load of complete strangers and ask them a load of questions about a subject I knew very little about. The baptism of fire, if ever there was one. Right. But as you do it, you get better at it. And at the same time, as you get better at it, your confidence builds up and you kind of get this positive feedback, which as you do it, you get better at doing it, so you do it more.
I think that's absolutely right, Malcolm. And maybe I'll get you to teach the last bit of today, which is about exactly that I think that there is, that it is all about practice and sort of, doing it, that you can feel more confident doing it. So be brave is the first tip that I give. I think one very common thing we do is talk about things we have in common. So that came up, talking about the weather is one of those things. These days, COVID is one of those things. But yes, things around us as well. So I started a conversation at a shop once because they had both Halloween decorations and Christmas decorations at the same time. And so I just commented on that, and that started a conversation. Or I've pointed out I've been watching a dog running around having fun in the park, and I'll comment on that dog to someone else, bring their attention to it. So commenting on something we have in common, giving a compliment. I mean, some people feel a little nervous about that, and because it could be misconstrued as hitting on the person. And so if that's something you're concerned about, compliments, especially about someone's appearance, are maybe not the way you want to go. But if you do feel confident with that, it is a lovely thing to do. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with making an observation about something that that person is, noticing that a person is reading a book or doing that kind of thing. And so that kind of links to the next one, which is curiosity. So I've asked people, I asked a lady why she was wearing airplane earrings, or I had two amazing conversations at train stations. I started talking to a couple that had these giant backpacks. And so I was asking what that was all about. And they told me about their upcoming trip. They were climbing Kilimanjaro. And there was a lady with a hard hat at the train station, and that's fairly unusual. So I said, what's the deal with that? And she was doing the setup for Britain's Got Talent. So that was a really fun conversation. So we are ready for our second poll, Sean. Let's give it a go. Just thought it'd be fun for everybody to think about what's your favorite way. What do you think is the best way to start a conversation with a stranger?
People are starting to vote.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to move on to, I'm going to just spend a couple of minutes because I want to make sure we have time to do some brainstorming about how to end a conversation. Because like I said earlier, that's the part that I find the hardest. But I'm going to spend just a couple minutes very briefly sharing at a very high level some research about how to maintain a conversation. So, like I said, all of you know how to start a conversation, but once the conversation is going, what now? And I don't want to talk about this too much, partly because, I don't think people should enter a conversation worrying too much about, oh, I should do this, I shouldn't do this, be in the moment. And not thinking too much about, oh, I better make sure I don't say this or that kind of thing. The whole idea is to get out of your head and just, be there and in the moment talking to the person. But I would like to say a few things, mostly just, again, to sort of allay fears that you might have. So one thing that we probably all know about is that open-ended questions are useful to get people talking, right? But there's research showing that asking follow-up questions is especially appreciated, and people like you more when you ask follow-up questions. So don't forget, you don't have to just ask a single question. When they answer it, don't move on to something else right away. You can ask them a bit more about it, ask them to elaborate on that. So people like it when you do that. There's research on changing the topic. So people worry a lot about, when is the right time to change the topic? And I think to some extent you need to be patient because, this is kind of an unusual situation for many people. And so it takes a little bit of time to feel comfortable. So, try and be patient and leave a little bit of time to sort of get into a topic. But essentially what we're trying to do here is make a connection. So we're kind of fumbling around until we find a way to connect to the other person. And so if a topic just isn't working for you, just change the topic and talk about something else. So don't be too worried if you feel like it's time to change the topic, just go ahead. One thing that came up in the chat was someone saying, okay, well, maybe it's not so hard to have this kind of chit chat with someone, but how do I get onto talking about something more meaningful? And there's new research on that too. It's not even published yet. It's not by me. But there's research showing that people are actually more worried about having a meaningful conversation than they should be. So the idea here being that actually people, we feel like, well, we can't talk about real stuff with someone that we've just met because, that's especially weird. And they're going to find that awkward and it's just not possible. But actually people find it less off-putting than you think. So we really worry a lot, not only about how we're going to feel, but we worry so much about the other person and making them feel uncomfortable. And you can try. I mean, as long as you're doing it sensitively and you're not forcing someone to have a conversation. So if they don't want to talk about something, that's fine too. And if you are worried about putting them in an uncomfortable situation, you can just say that. Say, look, I'd love to hear what you think about X. If you're not comfortable doing.
Oh, Gillian, we've lost you.
I got muted, but I've unmuted myself. And then the last thing I wanted to say, again, in this sort of theme of don't worry, is don't worry about saying the wrong thing. Because there's a lot of research looking at, not in talking to strangers, but in talking to people who are bereaved, for instance, to people who need social support for various things that they're dealing with. It turns out that, I think we all kind of feel like, well, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I make things worse? The research seems to suggest that, okay, there might be a few things that are wrong, and I'm sure you already know what those things are. But for the most part, what matters is that you're conveying support. It doesn't really matter exactly what you say. So again, this seems to be a situation where we worry a lot about something that we really shouldn't. So just to summarize again, you can ask follow-up questions. Don't worry too much if you feel like you want to change the topic. Don't worry so much about going too deep too fast. And don't worry so much about saying the wrong thing. Okay, so one thing I just want to point out at this point, I've been rah, 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 talk to strangers, it's awesome. Conversations do involve two people. So, I've been doing this for a while now. I feel like, I'm more confident. I feel like I have some skills, but there are still times where I start a conversation with someone and it just doesn't go anywhere. It just peters out. And, it could be that the other person is worried about lots of things, or they're just really shy, or whatever, all these things we've talked about before. It doesn't always work. And I think that's okay. So I think we just need to feel okay about conversations not working out as well. So you will get better and more comfortable the more you do this, but that doesn't mean that 100% of the conversations are going to go great. And so I think it's important to realize that as well. Okay, so we are going to move on to my very favorite topic, which is how to end a conversation. And we are going to go back to have you ever questions. So can you use your reaction buttons at the bottom? Again, use a clap or a thumbs up if you say yes, and the surprised face if you say no. So there's two questions. First one is, have you ever felt stuck and unable to end a conversation with a stranger? Okay, so I'm seeing a few surprised faces meaning no, but mostly I would say the majority is thumbs up, people saying yes, sometimes I feel stuck. I put my hand up too. Second question, have you ever felt stuck and unable to end a conversation with someone other than a stranger? Now I think we have one lone person who said, a couple people who said
2 or 3, but everyone else looks like thumbs up.
But I think even more thumbs up there. So my point in asking those two questions together is just to point out this isn't just a problem that we have with strangers, right? So I think just in general, we don't want to be impolite, and we just don't know how to do this in a polite way. So yeah, let's say your worst fear comes true. The person that you're talking to is just kind of boring, or they're making you feel uncomfortable. How do you end that conversation? And so it's something I really like to talk about in the workshop, because if you have a strategy and a plan for how to deal with this, then maybe that fear isn't quite so scary. So we're going to have a little group discussion with Lowry on the whiteboard. And let's see what people think about how we can end a conversation. I know that's very broad because it can be in many different contexts, right? But think of a context that makes sense for you and how you might end a conversation.
Need the toilet.
Excellent.
I normally thank them for their time.
Perfect. Barbara,
it's been lovely chatting to you.
You are one of the people that says, no, you don't have a problem ending the conversation.
No.
All right. And
that's right, yeah.
To be honest, Barbara, this is the answer. I've run this workshop like 6 times before today, and most of the answers are like Malcolm's, coming up with excuses. And at some point, someone always says what you do, which is, I just say thank you, and we're done, and that's it. Any other thoughts?
One thing I've heard from people telling me the way they've ended conversations with strangers is just to tuck into your phone, or to do all those things, close body language,
all the things we talked about related
all the things we talked about that are signs that we think the other person doesn't want to talk to us. You can then bring those things to make it look closed off. But I prefer also to just be upfront and be like, cool, thanks for your time, and then make a move.
Wish them a good day.
Perfect.
So it was lovely talking to you.
Yes, great. That's kind of the same as lovely to chat. And I think we've got some things. Oh, hang on a second. I need a new battery in my headphones. I can't hear you. Sorry about that. Yes, we've got some things in the chat about just saying that you have to go, so that fits in with our excuses thing. And Sean just saying, you know, nice to say thank you.
For me, it's about being genuine and saying it's nice to meet you if it has been, or, you know, but whatever I'm saying, as long as it's truthful, that feels really important.
Perfect.
Gently.
And I think we'll sort of wrap up the group discussion there, because I think that's the key. I think we all feel, I think a lot of people, for whatever reason, feel a little awkward about ending, which is funny, right? Because no conversation is going to last forever, and someone needs to end it. On that note, there's actually research showing that, you know, again, it's one of these coordination things that we struggle with. And it turns out that it's almost impossible to figure out when to end a conversation that is the perfect time for both you and the other person, right? Because there's 2 people involved. So there's a research study that was done, and they found that, I think it was something like 2% of the time, people ended a conversation at exactly the moment that both of them wanted to. So it is just a really hard thing to do. And I think what we're hearing from Barbara and Joan and others is that the best way to do it, we don't have to lie. I mean, if that's what you need to feel comfortable, you know, that's fine. But I think the best way to do it is just to say thank you, and I enjoyed the conversation, and I need to go now. So just in general, I think this is, if you have other fears that we haven't talked about today, what you can do is just sort of pre-think, you know, what would I do if this thing happens? And that can help sort of reduce your fears if you already know what you're going to do if those fears do come true, although they're unlikely to come true. Okay, we are almost out of time, but luckily we're at the last bits. So just to echo what Malcolm said a while back, I just do want to emphasize the power of practice. So I told you briefly about the scavenger hunt study that I did recently. I do find that a single conversation goes better than people think, but it's hard to learn from that. And so I think we really do need to try this multiple times. Give yourself some kindness and just be brave and keep working at it. And it is something that gets easier, and you can get more confident over time.
And you can just fake it as well sometimes.
Fake it until you make it.
Yeah, if you want to have a conversation with somebody and you're awkward and just stumbling and you're having difficulties with it, it's much harder. If you're shooting yourself, but you know you've got to have this conversation and you just fake it and you go in all bright and breezy, then you make it very often.
Sounds like good advice. Okay, so I think we're wrapping up now. We will give, if you'd like to stick around a little bit, I'll give you the opportunity to go into a breakout room with a new partner to start practicing now. But if you need to go, that's absolutely fine. But just to do a little wrap up first, I'll just talk for one more minute and then Lowry will wrap up on Eden's side. We have talked about why talking to strangers is awesome, all the different benefits that it gives you. We've talked a little bit about some of the things that people tend to worry about and hold people back. And hopefully we've had a little bit of practice, building some skills and convincing you that you already have the skills that you need. I would love to hear from you if you try things out and hopefully things go well and you want to share successes with me or share failures too, that's fine. We'll have my contact details. I share my talking to strangers stories on Twitter with the hashtag talking to strangers. So check those out or add your own. And I just want to thank you for coming today. It's been great to see so many people, and thank you all for engaging and playing along with all the fun little things we can do with Zoom. And I hope you've enjoyed the session, and I'll stick around for some questions, but I also want to make sure people, we have 1 minute before I'm making people late. Pass over to Lowry to do wrap up on Eden's side.
Thanks, Gillian. Yeah, that was amazing. As Gillian just said, we do have time, well, we don't have time, but if you have time yourself and want to stay, we do have the option to do an extra breakout room just with 1 or 2 people at the end. So if you're welcome to stay for that if you'd like, but we appreciate some people might have to leave. Thank you so much. I feel like we could have talked about that for another 3 hours. That, like, the time's gone really fast and I feel like we could have just carried on and learned so much, but I feel like, yeah, thank you so much. That was really useful and great to have a real run through of the sort of the barriers and the benefits. Yeah, huge thank you to you. Just quickly, we really would appreciate if we could get people's feedback on this session and whether it's something that you'd want us to look into more. So one of my colleagues, I think Joe, might put a survey link in the chat box. So if you're able to share, click on that and just share your thoughts with us, that would be great. We've also got, with Eden Communities, we've got other events going on like this, and if you feedback to us, we might do an event that you want us to do specifically. So if you keep an eye out for future events on our Facebook page and on the Eden Communities website, which I'm hoping we might put a link in the chat in the moment for that. But yeah, I think that was kind of all that I had to update from. We'll be sharing, I know a few of you asked for recordings, we will share a recording of this session so you can catch up if you've missed any bits. Yeah, thank you so much for coming, and we hope to see you all again at another event soon. If you want to stay for the breakout rooms, do
or to ask me questions
and to ask any more questions, and if not, if you'd like to head off now, that's totally fine, and it's been lovely to have you. Thank you so much. Bye.